Welcome back to Temple Emmanuel. This week our Torah portion is Tisa, which means as you lift up. It is an enormously complex and relatively long Torah portion. At the end of the description of building the Mishkan, building the tabernacle, however, we have one passage which is familiar to just about every Jew. And we read from 31 verse 16, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. The people of Israel shall observe or guard the Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, to do the Shabbat l'dorotam, for their generations, brit olam. It is an eternal covenant. And of course, anyone who attends Shabbat services, makes Kiddush at home, we understand this text and we sing it. We have all kinds of different melodies for it. The text comes after the admonition about observing Shabbat, which is attached to the end of the work of building the Mishkan, the ancient tabernacle that our ancestors carried with them as a meeting place with God throughout their wanderings in the 40 years, and really may have even kept it up until the building of the permanent temple under King Solomon. The rabbis teach us that this admonition and direction and this statement about guarding Shabbat as a brit olam, as an eternal covenant, is placed at the end of the building of the Mishkan. Because building the Mishkan was the most important thing that our ancestors were doing in the wilderness at that time. They were out of Egypt, they were freed slaves, they were just beginning to organize their nationhood, and the tabernacle was the center. And it would have made sense to say, look, this tabernacle is so important, this is such an overwhelming task, we need it to keep God's presence with us, we need it to run the people, we need it to be perhaps even an administrative center, that we're going to put Shabbat aside. And we're going to put Shabbat aside so that we can get this done, because that's even more important than Shabbat, to have a dwelling place where God can be with us. And our rabbis tell us that this passage is there at the end of the building of the Mishkan to teach us that even building a place for God in our midst is not a reason to violate Shabbat. To tell us that even having a place for sacrifices and for the candelabrum, the menorah, and the place for the showbread and the place for sacrifices, nothing in that was as important as observing the Shabbat as a brit olam, as an eternal covenant. Today, we modern Jews can observe Shabbat in lots of different manners. Certainly as liberal Jews, we don't say that there is this exact list of things that you cannot do on Shabbat, but rather we should look at Shabbat as a day in which we do not engage in our regular occupations, but rather we make it a day that is different, where we cease, because lishbot, to make a Shabbat, really means to cease. We cease our everyday activities and we do other things. Hopefully other things that include communal prayer, coming together with the congregation to pray, even if we don't do so all week, time with our family, time for Torah study, and just time to relax. It has been said, I believe it was Abraham Joshua Heschel, that more than the Jews keeping Shabbat, Shabbat kept the Jews. And it continues until this day. Regardless of how you observe your Judaism, or what synagogue you go to, the central point of our week is Shabbat. It is the day that we are to spend with God, with our families, and perhaps with ourselves as well. And so in Tisa, how do we lift up the people of Israel? One of the many ways we do that is by understanding that Shabbat overrides just about everything else. And regardless of how busy our lives are, making some time for Shabbat is essential, not just for the Jewish community, but for our families and for our souls as well. Shabbat Shalom.